Hello and welcome to You Sew You. My name's Zoe and this is my channel about all the crafty bits and pieces I get up to. I knit, I sew, I spin on a drop spindle, I dabble in weaving from time to time, and anything else that takes my crafty fancy. So this week is our What I've Been Making in April podcasty type video. So grab a brew, put your feet up and let's get started. So welcome back to any returning viewers, and to any new viewers a very warm welcome to you. As I said in the introduction, this is our podcasty type What I've Been Working On in April video. I had intended to get this to you last week, but life happened. Nothing to worry about, just threw a curveball to my schedule. Yeah, we've got a few bits and pieces to show you. You'll see behind me my temperature cross stitch. I've not touched that all month. I've not even finished writing down the temperatures for April. So that's not going to get an update today, but I do have lots of other bits and pieces to show you. So let's get going with what I'm wearing. This is a tunic shirt that I made as a Minerva Makers project last summer? Summer before? Last summer, I think. Time's an illusion at the moment. I don't know. It was hot when I made it. It's a quilting cotton shirt. I don't often use quilting cotton, but for summer weather it's great. And I actually used a Lakala pattern to make this shirt. So Lakala, if you're not aware, is I think they might be Russian, judging by the translation of the instructions. It's a website where you put in your own measurements and the patterns are drafted to those measurements. Make sure you put your height in. I didn't with this, and it's a bit longer than I'd like, but it's not a massive issue. And yeah, the patterns are really quite affordable. Well, I say quite very affordable. If you're on a tight budget and you want to get some patterns, I'd recommend Lakala. I would recommend that you get some garment sewing behind you first, because the instructions are a little bit scant. But yeah, the affordability is incredible. It only costs a couple of, like £2-3 per pattern, and they are drafted to the measurements that you put in. So okay, you're going to need to put in different measurements for different people, but if you're mainly sewing for yourself, that's not an issue. So yeah, Lakala if you're on a budget. But like I say, get some garment sewing behind you first, because the instructions are... Some of the translation is a little bit suspect, and you have to kind of think a little bit to work out what they mean by some of the terminology, generally sewing and garment specific terminology. They've been directly translated by the little fairies that live inside your computer. So sometimes they don't quite get the terminology, how we would say it in English. And there's fewer instructions than you'd even get in one of the big four commercial pattern companies. So you do need to have a little bit of understanding about how garments go together first. But yeah, they are very, very affordable, so it's a good resource, as I say, if you're on a tight budget. And there's more variations on the basic blocks than you could possibly need. So you do get lots of very similar line drawings coming out, but with little tweaks here and there. So yeah, you can pretty much find most things that you're looking for there. So that's a good one, and that's what I'm wearing. So that's that, and let's have a little look at what's finished. So finished objects, there's not many. We're in the middle of sock madness, so most of my crafting time at the moment is socks. And I have 2 pairs that I've finished this month, and I haven't actually managed to finish anything else. Not a sausage. So the first pair that I finished in April is the All the Bees pattern. So these are Sock Madness socks. The bees are representing the brioche strand that comes down here, the beads that are in the middle, on the cuff and in the middle of some of the patterning, and there's bubbles on here as well. So yeah, all the bees. These were a lovely pair of socks to knit. Top down knitting with a beaded cast on. They're pretty much fully charted if I remember rightly, and they look so pretty as you're working on them. So these were a joy to knit, and I can see me getting lots of wear out of them. I've knit them in Cascade Heritage sock yarn, which is merino nylon, and it's super soft. So yeah, looking forward to wearing those ones. They'll be worn a lot. The other pair of socks that were started in April, to be fair, they were finished just like the first weekend of May. But I'm counting it because I didn't film. they would have been in my works in progress if I'd have filmed last weekend like I'd intended. So just get these ones onto the blocker. Now these socks that I'm about to show you are knit in Hobby Happy Feet, which is a budget yarn company. So commercial yarn, both pairs of socks are commercial yarn. Hobby is incredibly affordable. It's a company based in Denmark. Their newsletters make me giggle every time they come through. They send out most days some sort of, hey, we've got an offer on this email. But the way they write their newsletters just makes me giggle every time. So these are the Belief in Yourself socks. Oh my goodness. Now these were a bit of a slog to knit. I have managed to get through to the next round of Sock Madness. In fact, they've extended the round because everybody was finding these ones tough. Even the faster knitters were taking longer to, like, the ones that finished a pair of socks in like 17 hours and ridiculous things like that. Even they were finding these ones a bit slower. So construction-wise, these are a little bit different. We start with this lace border fold-down cuff at the top, but that's knitted flat and grafted at the end with a 3-needle bind-off. And then you pick up the stitches around the flat edge of the lace to then knit down the sock. So you do have a good chance here to check that you've got the right size that you're knitting before you get too far down, so that's a good thing. And we've got stranded, I'll take these off the blockers in a minute to show you the stranded pattern at the back and the pattern at the front. So we've got stranded checkerboard with a motif down the back of the leg and into the heel. And then we've got brioche at the front. So if I just take this sock off the blocker to show you the patterning. So the lace pattern has this like leaf shape to the edge, and then you've got ribbing in your contrast colour underneath. So that's obviously going to hold your sock up, which is great. Now the colourwork down the back has this leaf motif, although in my colours does look a little bit more like fire. This is my Socks of Fire saga. If you haven't watched the Eurovision film, that will probably mean nothing to you, but hey. So yeah, you've got leaves all the way down the back in colourwork, so that's normal standard stranded colourwork. Oh, that's easy to say. All the way back down the back, and the pattern has increases in the colourwork for the heel at the back. And the checkerboard carries on along the foot. And at the front, we have this brioche leafy section. Now the pattern actually gives you directions to knit this in 1 pass brioche. So that was my first time knitting 1 pass brioche and my first time doing increases and decreases in brioche. Can you tell why these were a bit of a slog? It's mainly they were a slog because I was knitting to time and trying to secure my place on the next round. I think if I wasn't on a clock, these would be quite enjoyable to knit. Particularly once you get your head around the 1 pass brioche. I will be doing a 1 pass brioche video in the not too distant future now that I've sort of got my head around it. Possibly not with the increases and decreases because I'm not entirely convinced that I know what's going on with them. But it worked, so hey. So yes, that's my finished objects. Just the 2. And yeah, keep an eye out for that 1 pass brioche video. It will be coming up fairly soon. I just need to pick out some yarn for it and work out my numbers. And and I'll demonstrate how that works. There are a couple of places where you can get information on One Pass Brioche, but it's not widely available. You have to sort of hunt for it, and they're not always that clear. So I'm hoping to address that in a week or two. So yes, that's coming. So moving on to works in progress. Let's start with some crochet. Now, as you may recall from earlier in the year, I am doing the Gamer Crafting Blanket Club this year. So each month she sends me out 2 skeins of yarn. They are galaxy themed this year, and I'm using the Sparkle sock base. Thought you could have sparkle if it's a galaxy, really. So she does the blanket club in different weights of yarn. I just chose the sock weight. That was the only one that had the sparkle option. But she does have the chunkier, heavier weights as well. So if you want a thicker blanket, when she does her next blanket club sign-ups next year, that option is there. All the skeins of yarn are different. Sometimes they're quite similar. January's were quite similar to each other, but not quite the same. February's were a little bit further apart. March's were even further apart. So as you progress through the year, you end up with a whole bunch of different yarns. I am at the moment intending on doing 12 squares for my blanket. I'm using Sophie's Dream as the basis for the pattern. So I may potentially end up with yarn left over because I'm only needing just under a skein for each square. But I might decide to do a second square for each month. We'll see what the size is like once I have like 3 or 6 squares together or something. So I'm this far through my, I think this is February's yarn. Yeah, this is February's yarn. So I'm that far through my next square. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Sophie's Dream pattern, it takes the centre square from Sophie's Universe and repeats that. It's the idea is to do it in like a solid or a gradient type yarn. And you do the separate squares, join them together and put a border on. So that's the pattern that I'm basing it on. I thought it looked kind of solar system-y. The yarn for January and actually this yarn for February are quite heavily variegated, so it's turning into more of an exercise in developing texture than the visuals of it, but you can kind of see some of the lacier bits of the pattern. There's bobbles and all sorts, and front post double crochets to give a bit of texture into the blanket, so it will be a heavily textured blanket. As I go through the year, it's going to look a little bit different on each square because the yarns are all different. So that's a really interesting project. So probably about halfway through the year I'll decide whether I'm going to be using the second skein for each month to make the blanket bigger or not. But we'll see how we go. So that's my year-long crochet project. As I say, I haven't touched my year-long cross-stitch project. I haven't touched any of my cross-stitch this month. My library cat cross-stitch I don't think I've touched since last year. I've also not touched my bead loom, which I really need to get on with, but the trouble with that is I need enough time during the day when I've got daylight to do it because the beads are tiny, but I've got lots of things that have just been sat around this month not getting touched because socks and life. So there we go. My next work in progress that I'm going to show you is actually something that I showed you in a video a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. And it's a fluff to stuff project. So fluff to stuff, if you're not aware, is a spinning and then working up your handspun yarn or handspun that you've bought from somewhere. Pretty much year-long challenge from Mina Phillip of Knitting Expat, Grace from Babbles Travelling Yarns, and Mars from Hey Brownberry. So it's all about intentionally spinning stuff to use in things. That being said, I'm not being overly intentional in terms of what this is going to be used for. I've got various options of what it could be. It could be a shawl or a scarf or a hat or something. But I'm working on a fractal spin on my drop spindle. This is a Turkish spindle. As you can see, I haven't got very far. I'm still on my first ply. But like I say, life and socks. That's pretty much my theme for April. Life and socks. Yeah, so I've spun up my first bump. This is fibre that I bought from Knitpicks, so it's their Peruvian Highland fibre, and I dyed it with Kool-Aid a couple of years ago during Vlogmas. So there is a video available for how I dyed it. There's also a video available for how I prepared the fibre to spin as a fractal. I'm doing a 2-ply fractal to maximise the yardage, as I've only got the one lot of fibre for it. So that's my spinning project. I like my Turkish spindle, it's very cute, and it makes little turtles that are very pretty. Spinning the smaller bumps has not been too bad so far. For those of you that haven't seen the fibre prep video, the bumps that I'm spinning, the little nests, are quite long in length in order to get the colour management that you need for a fractal. So yeah, that's going to take me a while. But hopefully I'll come up with something that's kind of fingering to sportage weight, which is in line with most of what I spin. So if I do decide not to do it as a one skein cowl or shawl or something, I can pair it with something else that I've spun, or something else that I've dyed, because I've got some Kool-Aid dyed yarn that was already yarn when I dyed it. So there's options there, but yeah, probably a cowl or a shawl once it's done, because you can't have too many of them. Yeah, okay. I haven't touched my hand spin knitting actually. If you recall, a little while ago I started knitting up some hand spun that I've got as bats for Christmas from my partner's brother. But yeah, I haven't done that either in April. Or my lace shawl, I need to finish that really soon. I need to get that finished. I'm on the board. There's no excuse. Beaded lace shawl, I just need to actually sit down and do it. But yeah, life in socks. So the final work in progress that I'm going to show you, my goodness, I'm scatty today. This again I showed you the other week. This is my inklet loom from Ashford. I've had it a couple of years now, maybe 3 years. Bought it before I moved here, so yeah, about three or 4 years. And I showed you a little while ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, I think it was the last video I put out, warping this up for a pattern that I drafted myself using an online band weaving pattern generator. So this is how far I've got. I had hoped to have finished this before I filmed the podcast, but life and socks. So it's coming out okay. There are issues with some tension on the side and at the start of the band. I don't weave enough to quite yet have the consistency when I start a new band off. I tend to get better as I keep going, and I'm still working on getting the edges nice and neat on my band weaving. But again, that's because I don't weave all the time. I do so many other crafts that it's pretty much an occasional craft, but that's fine because it's quite relaxing. And actually when the band's finished, it will still be functional. It'll just be a little bit messier on the edges, which if I'm using it as an edging on a garment or something isn't going to be a problem, because you'd be sewing those edges down anyway, so you can neaten up then. I have noticed as I've been weaving it that the pattern hasn't been coming out quite as clearly as I would have been like, because the colours are quite close together. So I'm thinking I might warp this up with the colours in a different order, or perhaps using the silver somewhere in there to just see if I can get a different effect from the draft when I'm weaving it up. It's not that I'm unhappy with it, it's just like, I'd expected there to be a bit more contrast there, that kind of thing. But that's okay. It's still, like I say, going to be functional, and I'm still learning and I'm still improving my weaving, so practice makes progress. So that is all my works in progress and all my finished objects, and a bit of waffle about what I'm thinking about doing in the next few weeks. And that's pretty much me for this week. I will obviously be looking to get that band finished and a new band on the loom in the not too distant future. I will need to get my hand spun shawl finished. I've got a sweater that's been on the needles for like 3 years that I really ought to get a crack on with. I've got cross stitches to finish. I've got another one to start. But I think I will wait until I've finished the cat library. I might just wait until I've got another hoop for my embroidery stand. I've got hoops I can do it in hand. But I've got a rather cute easy cross stitch. It's one where the pattern's been printed onto the fabric to a point. It's a girl in a dress, and you just stitch the dress up, and the rest of it's printed and outlined. So that's quite cute, and I do want to get that done to have up in my sewing space. I've also got some sewing that needs to get done because I'm a bit behind on my Minerva Makers project, so I need to go and check my seedlings in the garden and cut some fabric out today. You never know, I might even get some cross stitch done because I've done that for ages. But yeah, things are just a little bit scatty at the moment. Schedules are going through a loop at the moment, but things are even out, so yeah, it's all good. So yes, that's it for this week. I aim to put a video up every week. Obviously I missed last week, but most of the time I get a video up each weekend. Every month there'll be a video like this of what I've been making the month before, and then there'll be other bits and bobs in between. So sometimes we'll be focused on a project, sometimes we'll be focused on a technique, and sometimes it'll just be me waffling at a camera. So if you enjoyed this video, if you want to see more from me, like and subscribe down below and ding that bell just like all the YouTubers tell you. And I will see you next week. It might be the brioche video, it might be something else, who knows. Yeah, happy crafting, and until next time, bye bye for now.